So what did you think of Garrett Hedlund as Neal Cassady, Bob?
Well, I thought he was really pretty good. I mean, I only saw the trailer. No, he had the moves, the Neal character. And Carrick looks sort of like Carrick, too. No, I'm glad to see somebody captured those things. So I have a lot of memories of those guys. Well, guys like Lou Welch and Neal Cassady. Neal I spent quite a bit of time with. He used to come and stay with me in Big Sur. And, you know, I'm glad somebody's showing them, you know.
Did you meet Neal essentially through Plymouth?
I met him before that. I had a show at the Babbitt Strait for about 5 blocks. And he was there, and he was on the corner where the Batman was, Sacramento and Fillmore.
So we're talking San Francisco.
San Francisco. He was standing outside on the corner there was a liquor store, and then just in a little bit was what is now a bank, but 2222 Fillmore was the Batman Gallery, and then just next to it was McClure J. DeFale's studio upstairs. But anyway, I came out, Charlie or Dave Hazelwood said, hey, you gotta come meet Neal Cassady. I said, oh, cool. So I came out and there he was. He looked like a sort of balding, old Midwestern beatnik, you know? And
this year, what year would this be?
This would be like 60, 61. So anyway, he had a white t-shirt on and he had the proverbial pack of
Marlboros?
No, they hadn't even invented marbles yet. I think they were Camels or Lucky Strikes rolled up on his thing. And he was on the corner and he was hanging some, he jumped up and was hanging some of the street sign. And then as he walked up to meet me, or after he met me, he took his leg and kicked it over the parking meter, which was very high. About you know, it was
so
like,
was Neal.
Yeah, Neal was high, yeah. Anyway, so there he was, doing his sort of flexing. And as soon as I talked to him, there was a familiarity. It was almost like I was talking to myself in a very funny way, an older self, but yet it was like, this is some guy I was in a cell with or in somewhere. It was like I knew him. We both sort of just knew each other immediately. So, I mean, one day he like, oh, hi, how are you? I'm hugging you. It was like, oh, yeah, hey, man, there you. Sort of similar to some of the llamas I meet.
Of the beats, Burroughs seemed to be the only male who was not particularly captivated by Neal. He thought he was a con man. Which,
he was a con man.
Can you say more about Neal as a con man?
Well, there's a lot of strange stories. David Bearden told me this story. How he went with Neal. He was going with a young couple that were going to get married, or something or other like that. And they started going this Dodge Dart, he and this couple, and Neal wouldn't let the guy drive his own car. I pushed him out, had to be the driver. And then she wanted to stop and call her mother about something. And so she stopped and she went and was in a phone booth. And somehow it ended up, the gist of the story was that Neal ended up in the phone booth with her, waving to the people in the car while he bawled her sort of sitting up on the thing. So that is one of the stories.
You mean he bawled the girlfriend of the car owner?
Yes, who they were on their way to try out for the wedding or do something. They were getting married. Anyway, so that's a sort of, but I don't know that happened. That's the story I heard.
Well, there's a lot of stories like that about Neal.
The one I do know about is, like Neal, often when he came over, that's back when they had seeds in pod, you know, the old Guerrero pod, the Mexican pod, whatever. But anyway, back in the old days, everyone had shoebox lids.
Right, yeah.
You had your shoebox lid, and Neal would come into a place, and I remember this one specific thing where there was a guy and a bunch of You know, he would come in and he would get the shoebox lid and start rolling joints. Where's your pot? And the guy would give him the stash, and he would start rolling joints. Here's one. Here, you like that one. Here, you like. Here's one for me. Here's another for me. Anyway, and the guy's old lady and him were there, and a bunch of poets, and the story is how he was talking to one guy as he was bawling the guy's old lady in the bathroom, and somehow he had her head in the toilet, and but he was talking about Chaucer to someone else. He was carrying on a conversation that had been going all the way to the bathroom. Now that is the kind of mind Neal had. He was like he's like one of those mythic kind of characters, like Achilles or something, that had a lot of levels of mind. Also, you could just say he had a lot of Benzedrine in him.
Even so, it's pretty remarkable to keep those threads.
To keep those threads, and to be, I wouldn't say he was a sociopath, but he was definitely not a moralist, to bawl somebody's old lady with her head in the toilet as he's carrying on the conversation about Chaucer. And speaking, I can't do Gaelic speaking Chaucer talk, but Neal could.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was a lot to Neal.
Yeah.
I told you one of the more fun times I had was there on, what was the name of the street? It wasn't Polk Street. The street Charlie had his place on. It was Gulf Street. And it's a one-way street. It was right around the corner from Hazelwood's Hour-Hunt Press. Anyway, I was there one night with Charlie and Ann and Neal and maybe another person or so. And there was this other beautiful girl named Ann who later became Malegla's girlfriend. But anyway, another story's about her. But we were watching television, and Neal and Ann were sitting like, there's Neal, here's Ann, there's Charlie, there's me, there's Dave Hazelwood, there's Glenn Todd. And we're watching, it's funny how memory can go, you can remember those things. We're watching Ugetsu. Ugetsu. And as it was going on, you know, Neal was constantly rapping off the television. He said, I see, it's who gets who, not who gets who. Or, you know, and then every once in a while, he would take Ann's foot, her bare foot, up and smack it hard, as like, bam! They were into some kind of little game.
Yeah, yeah.
And all through the thing was this running thing of him. You know, there would be someone hanging, and he would say, "Oh yes, it's a jailhouse salad," or I don't know. You know, I can't off the top of my head, but that actually came out to be a rather Neal kind of thing, if you know what a jailhouse salad is.
But what is a jailhouse salad?
That's where you give head to someone's butt. You may be forced to do that in a jailhouse. They call it. I want a salad. Toss your salad.
Right, okay. I never knew what it meant, actually.
Now we know. A lot of what I remember about Neal wasn't always the franticness. And I told you the story. I guess I'll tell it again.
Yeah, for the posterity.
Wrap it up. I tried to tell Ginsberg about it one of the last times I was hanging out with him when he was at Gemini, and they were publishing his drawings and things, which was, I thought, amazing. I had to say, look, Alan, you've already stole the photographic world, the poet world, now you're going to invade the goddamn art world. Is there nothing safe from you fucking weird faggot Jew poets? But anyway, he loved it if you talked to him that way. I didn't really say it quite like that. But I did call him Ginsey and Mother Ginsburg sometimes, like Neal did. But he didn't like it. I mean, he didn't like it when Neal called him those things. And I was trying to tell him this story I'm going to tell you about Neal. And he said, oh, no, I don't want to hear it. If you really want to know, Bob, William Burroughs and I started the whole beatnik movement. Those other people had hardly nothing to do with it. and at this point, Alan was sort of like your grandma. I want another pretty boy, and I want to dress him up in a dress. Bring me another pretty boy, and I'll toss his salad. Or whatever, you know. Or let him toss my salad. Or we'll have a free-fall salad for all. Salad for all. Let there be free salad. Anyway, I'm living in Big Sur. He stopped through Big Sur to see me, like he and Ginsberg had often stopped. They knew where my house was, and the whole gang. But This time it was just him and Ann or some lady, and I'm really not sure whether it was Ann or not. But I know it was a lady he was with, but he was so beaten down, he was like just at his end. And he said that Cassady and them had gone on to L.A. and he just had to stop, you know. And I said, good, it's a good thing, because I had a friend and she had a house down there and she was away in San Francisco, and she told me I could use her house, give it to anyone that wanted to stay. There was food, you know, cereals and honey and, you know, there was potatoes and rice, and anyway, so I put him and her up in the house. Well, I had no drugs like he liked, but every morning he'd come up, and at that time I'd been drinking cough syrup for years. Oh, it was a great cough syrup, and had that hydrocodone in it, you know.
Yeah.
Synthetic morphine. Anyway, they had taken it off the market. So I'd found a therapy doctor that Susan actually had gone to, and he was giving me Dolafine back in those days. I'd heard about Dolafine, which turned out to be methadone from Burroughs, and they called it Dolafine at that time. So I was living on these Dolafines, which actually got me loaded than the damn cough syrup. And I didn't like the high, but I was used to it and digging it. So anyway, Neal would come up every morning, and I'd give him 2 Dolafine, and then we'd roll up some grass, and it was that old kind with the shake and all the crap, and we'd roll up a couple of joints. I'd give him a couple of joints, and you know, you had to smoke about a matchbox of it to get high, you know. It wasn't like the new kind of pot. At that time, I did grow a little pot once in a while, but just, anyway, it was off season or whatever. That's what was going on. So he stayed about 2 or 3 days, and then one morning he came up, and I started to give him the pills, and he was like, damn, I don't even want them. I'd rather be goddamn dead than live this way. Neal, no, I mean, here he is. He's a 40-year-old something pillhead, and there's no pills, and he's just like mellowing. And I know that transition because I did it. I moved to Big Sur to get away from drugs. And I was strung out when I moved there, and I did a whole winter going out in the wet and getting wood. I lived in a goddamn cinder brick cabin with a tin roof, and it was the coldest, horriblest place in the world to live, and I had a little baby, and my friends Dennis and his wife came in. We're all huddled around a pot-bellied stove when we weren't out foraging, often in the rain, to get more wood to put in the stove, and shivering there coming down on Heron. It was a great winter.
It was a great winter.
Yes. And later, of course, I got into cough syrup, but I got clean and sober in Big Sur, so I knew what Neal was going through. So here I am with Neal, and he's saying, no way, I don't want your pills, I don't want the pot, it's just, I can't stand being here. I told him, man, just mellow out, go have some tea, some chamomile and some honey. And he was like, no, we're leaving. And he did, he up and left. And within a few months, he was dead.
That's the last time you saw him?
It's the last time I saw him. And yeah, I tried to tell Ginsey that, and he was like, no, I don't want to hear about it. Me and Burroughs started.
Let me ask you one last question about Neal. You know, even though Neal was obviously a con man and amoral, shall we say, if not a sociopath, still people were drawn to him and wanted to be his friend. And enjoyed his company. If someone found out that he was bawling their old lady, they probably didn't stay as friend. Would that be accurate?
Oh yeah, that would be accurate. There were people, Cassady and Neal, but remember, it was the times. It was a time when people were doing things like that.
Yeah.
But no, I also think of Neal. I mean, when I first met Essay here, I remember saying that he reminded me of a combination of Neal and Jack Kerouac, and that the scene, because they had just got back from the Dharma bombs, and there was Scott, and there was all these people reading, and I was like, thank God there's some poetry in L.A., because, you know, I knew about Stewart and those guys, and they were all dead and gone, more or less, John Thomas, but they were more staid and laid back, and here were these guys. Essay was really out there and positive and promoting things, and with all said and done, Neal, like I said, when I first met him, I felt like I knew him, and I felt the same way with Essay when I first met him. It was like there was a recognition of spirit, and Neal was actually a very smart, wise, witty fucker. He was funny. Like, we all were hilariously laughing all through that Ugetsu thing. I can't remember all the details of the
Right,
words,
right.
but he had a very quick wit, you know, and there was something likable about the man. You were attracted to him. Like I say, like Achilles, or like, I mean, some of the greatest heroes were just simple men, you know. They were not, except they would have some, I mean, he was like a Greek or a Roman kind of hero, you know, though he was just a simple man who was a pillhead. And if, to me, the Kesey thing, the macho thing, all of that was just part of his characteristics, but there were many more characteristics. I never saw him as I wouldn't say he was an Al-Anon, he was more of a user.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that he was always helping other people, he was more of a taker.
Right.
But yet, in the thing of it all, he was also a giver, and there was a comradeship or a support. I mean, you could count on him. If a bunch of rednecks jumped on you, it would be nice to have Neal there. You know, I mean, him and Charlie took together like you know, a house of fire. You know, and not everyone is drawn to Plymell. He's an old curmudgeon, you know, and Neal had his ways, but yet those two, they rode around on motorcycles and shit, and being around them, they just fit, you know. And I think I fit in there too. I don't know, something about Midwest, or you know, it's like an unhipness almost. That's hip. An unhip hipness.
That is it.
Yeah, that's hip.